The Baltimore Ravens haven't been the most active team in free agency, but then they hardly ever are, and that's historically been a good thing. The Ravens, like many of the more consistently competitive teams in the NFL, prefer to make a few highly impactful and strategic moves during the free agency period and offseason that oftentimes end up underrated as opposed to the over-the-top and bombastic headline moves made by teams that have more cap space than they do stability. The re-signing of Ronnie Stanley immediately gives you stability at one of the most important positions on any NFL team, but it also provides Lamar Jackson and Todd Monken with something even more important: familiarity and continuity. With Stanley, Voorhees, Linderbaum, Faalele, and Rosengarten expected to be the starters at this point before the season, Ravens fans should feel a lot more confident with the offensive line going into the 2025 season as opposed to the 2024. Similarly, the addition of DeAndre Hopkins should be viewed more in line with the OBJ signing of 2023 than Nelson Aguilar or Deshaun Jackson signings, and gives this receiving room a lot more punch than it had going into last year when, at that point, all you had was a good rookie season out of Zay Flowers, a 380-yard, 4-touchdown season from Nelson Aguilar, and a year from Bateman that earned him an extremely team-friendly deal going into 2024. That deal and some of the other moves made around the AFC North rivals is going to be the focus of this video today, as we not only look at the value that the Ravens are getting out of Rashad Bateman, but also how both the Steelers and Bengals may have put themselves in somewhat desperate and precarious situations heading into 2025 and beyond. Let's get to it. Welcome in, everyone. This is Jordan with Ravens Flash Report, and today we're going to be discussing some of the roster moves made so far in free agency by the teams of the AFC North, with a particular focus on a few of them that could end up becoming franchise-altering in the near future. I don't say that to be hyperbolic, but the more I look at the direction of the Browns, Steelers, and Bengals, the more intrigued I am as to what their plan is when it comes to roster construction, salary cap distribution, and overall approach to winning in 2025. Let's begin by looking at the moves made thus far by each team in the division. Starting with the Cleveland Browns, who re-signed defensive end Myles Garrett despite early contract negotiation tactics we've seen before, including outbursts from Garrett's camp that he wanted to be traded. That was unsurprisingly never going to happen. Other than the $160 million deal for Garrett, the Browns really haven't made a whole lot of noise in free agency. Not that it's too surprising, considering that they have to pay Deshaun Watson nearly $37 million this year, and we don't know when he will return to the field, or if he will for that matter. Speaking of the Browns quarterbacks, they traded away Dorian Thompson-Robinson and a 2025 fifth-round pick to the Philadelphia Eagles for quarterback Kenny Pickett, who should now be viewed as the starter until further notice. The Browns have also released safety Juwan Thornhill and signed linebacker Devin Bush, the former Steeler. Notable Brown free agents include running back Nick Chubb, running back Deontay Foreman, wide receiver Elijah Moore, quarterback Jameis Winston, and wide receiver James Prochet. As far as the direction the 2025 Browns seem to be going in, would seem to be a tale we have all heard and seen played out before. The difference between this offseason and the regular season to come is there won't be the usual big-name signings or splash moves made beyond the re-signing of Garrett. There simply is too much money tied up into Deshaun Watson's contract. I'm not going to sit here and berate Garrett for getting what money he feels he deserves, and the Browns are willing to pay him given how much he has done for the franchise, but let's not pretend that Garrett is unaware of just how restricted the Browns front office is from a cap standpoint. It would be willful ignorance at best to say that this current Browns roster is in line to even remotely threaten for a championship anytime soon. Therefore, the idea that Garrett wants to be on a winning team, committed to winning, and also be awarded a $160 million contract with $88.8 million in guarantees is at odds, to say the least. The Pittsburgh Steelers have been more active in free agency than the Browns, releasing linebacker Preston Smith, who they signed mid-season from the Green Bay Packers, as well as defensive end Laren Ogunjobi. Free agents that they've signed elsewhere include running back Najee Harris, wide receiver Mike Williams, and cornerback Dante Jackson, all with the LA Chargers. Wide receiver Van Jefferson is now with the Tennessee Titans, quarterback Justin Fields with the New York Jets, and linebacker Elandon Roberts with the Las Vegas Raiders. And quarterback Russell Wilson, cornerback Cameron Sutton, and edge Jeremiah Moon have yet to sign with another team at the time of this video. But of course, the big news for the Steelers is the signing of wide receiver DK Metcalf to a 4-year, $132 million contract with $60 million fully guaranteed. This signing is one of the most interesting of the offseason to me, as instead of answering questions like many signings usually do, Stanley at left tackle, and Hopkins as wide receiver 3, the Metcalf signing actually poses more questions. Who will be throwing DK the ball? With Harris gone and only Warren and Gainwell under contract, will the Steelers' offense be less run-heavy? And finally, what does this mean for George Pickens, whose rookie contract is up after 2025? Until the Steelers sign a quarterback not named Mason Rudolph, we as fans can't really speculate too accurately what the plan is for the Steelers in 2025 from an offensive game plan point of view. The first and most obvious question to ask for the Steelers after the signing of DK Metcalf is the one I mentioned earlier. Who is throwing him the ball? With Wilson now an unrestricted free agent and Fields off to the Jets, the only quarterback on the roster is former Steeler Mason Rudolph, and forgive me if I don't believe that he is the Steelers' final answer to that question. There have been a lot of rumors about Aaron Rodgers joining the Steelers, which would give them a veteran under center, but at 41 years old, coming off a 5-12 season with the Jets after missing the previous season with a season-ending Achilles injury, I don't know if the former Super Bowl champion has any more left in him than the former Super Bowl champion they had in their last year with Wilson. With Van Jefferson and Mike Williams off to other teams, who accounted for 63.9% and 43.2% of offensive snaps respectively, there will certainly be targets available for Metcalf, but another of the previously mentioned questions still remain. What does the current role and future look like for George Pickens? Regardless of who is quarterbacking for the Steelers in 2025, Pickens will most likely see fewer targets with Metcalf on the other side. This isn't because it's so overwhelmingly obvious that Metcalf is the clear number 1 receiver and Pickens becomes the de facto number 2, but more so because throughout their careers, Metcalf has seen more targets per season and averaged more touchdowns than Pickens. Since being drafted in 2022, Pickens has averaged 104 targets, 62 receptions, over 1,000 yards, and 4 touchdowns per season. Over that same 3-year span, Metcalf eclipses Pickens in each of those categories with an average of 130 targets, 79 receptions, over 1,100 yards, and 7 touchdowns per season. Having said all that, I do believe that in 2025, Pickens will be used more in the deep passing game and Metcalf more on underneath routes and in the red zone, which will diversify their usage and keep them on the field more often as they try to complement each other's game. The Cincinnati Bengals, however, have made their offensive game plan quite clear. Throw the ball to Chase and Higgins and hope to outscore opponents every week. While I might respect the team's commitment to their drafted star wide receivers, I'm not entirely convinced locking up nearly 25% of your entire yearly cap space on 2 players that play the same position on one side of the ball is an effective strategy. But of course, I'm not an NFL GM. I have another video coming out soon where I do a deeper dive into the discussion about the Bengals wide receivers and how the Ravens' deal with Rashad Bateman could be one of the best in modern NFL from a value standpoint. But for now, let's get back to the rest of the Bengals' free agency updates, and we'll start with their, as of right now, notable unrestricted free agents, not including edge Sam Hubbard, who retired, cornerback Mike Hilton, right tackle Trent Brown, safety Von Bell, and running back Chris Evans. Their free agents that have signed with other teams include defensive lineman Sheldon Rankins with the Texans, right guard Alex Kappa with the Raiders, linebacker Akeem Davis-Gaither with the Cardinals, and Khalil Herbert with the Colts. The Bengals have re-signed several players, including tight ends Tanner Hudson and Mike Gesicki, defensive lineman B.J. Hill, right guard Cody Ford, and edge Joseph Osaya. In addition to these re-signings, they brought in linebacker Oren Burks from the Eagles, defensive lineman T.J. Slayton from the Packers, and running back Samaje Perine, who is coming from the Chiefs, but was with the Bengals before from 2020 to 2022, as well as a few games in 2019. The contract extensions for both Chase and Higgins and the impact it will inevitably have on the Bengals in 2025, along with the following 3 to 4 seasons, is something that I find worthy of its own video, which will be coming out soon, as I mentioned. A quick and dirty version of my view on the 2 contracts is that I understand and agree with Jamar Chase's, but I don't agree with T. Higgins, at least with the Bengals. He is worth the money that he's getting, but not as a wide receiver 2 on a team with Chase as the wide receiver 1. Making the best wide receiver in the league also the highest paid wide receiver in the league makes sense. But making your clear-cut wide receiver 2 the 9th highest paid wide receiver doesn't, especially when your defense was one of the worst last year and has seen significant losses in players like Hilton and Bell, along with Sam Hubbard's retirement. Basically, with Jamar Chase on your team, I don't think wide receiver is the biggest concern, nor the best use of a finite resource like cap space. I guess we'll have to see how it pans out for them along with the additions that they make during the draft. Now, I mentioned in the first sentence of this video that the Ravens haven't been the most active in free agency, but I still think it's important to cover the moves that we've made so far, as well as the players that have either left or have yet to sign somewhere. Starting with their unsigned, unrestricted free agents, we have wide receivers Nelson Aguilar, Deontay Hardy, Steven Sims, and longtime productive Raven Deontay Johnson. Veteran quarterback Josh Johnson, defensive lineman Brent Urban, linebacker Christian Welch, and cornerback Tre'Davious White. There's also cornerback Arthur Millette and safety Marcus Williams who were cut. As far as the Ravens who have found new homes, there's offensive lineman Patrick McCarry, who's joined the Jags, guard Josh Jones is with the Seahawks, linebacker Chris Board is now a Giant, cornerback Brandon Stevens is a Jet, and linebacker Malik Harrison has become a Steeler. Players that we have signed include, of course, wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins, linebacker Jake Hummel, and quarterback Cooper Rush. They also re-signed offensive lineman Ben Cleveland. They signed Ardarius Washington to a tender, linebacker Ronnie Stanley, as mentioned before, as well as fullback tight end Patrick Ricard and wide receiver Tylan Wallace, which were both cheap and important deals, both for wide receiver depth with Wallace, as well as making sure Derrick Henry has an all-pro blocker in front of him in Ricard. The highest remaining needs for this team as we move deeper into free agency and approach the draft is cornerback, edge, and both lines on offense and defense. It seems like a lot, but when I say need, what I really mean is that they are either thin there or could use upgrades and depth. Without a doubt, we come out of the draft with at least 1 to 2 of these needs addressed, but as always, we as fans want to see our team be top tier at every position every season. In reality, the Ravens are still sitting in a pretty good position from a roster standpoint, with regards to most of their starting positions. So when it comes to the direction of the team in 2025, the only one I see is up. Repeat as division champs, make it to the Super Bowl, and then win the dang thing. If you guys enjoyed this breakdown of each AFC North team's free agent roster moves so far, give the video a like. Subscribe if you're new, and comment which team you think has improved the most in the division down below. As always, guys, stay safe out there and go Ravens.